Craving the coffee flavor you love, but without the caffeine? Kachava's got you covered with their newest coffee flavor. This all-in-one nutrition shake delivers bold, authentic flavor crafted from premium decaffeinated Brazilian beans. Quality nutrition shouldn't be complicated. Just 2 scoops of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake, and you've got 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, and so much more. Whether you're craving that coffee taste to kickstart your morning ritual, or as a nutrient-packed reward to round out your afternoon, Kachava keeps you fueled and satisfied wherever your day takes you. Plus, it actually tastes delicious. No fillers, no nonsense. Just the good stuff your body craves. And for the times you feel like switching it up, you've got 7 flavors to choose from, all with the highest quality ingredients. Treat yourself to the flavor and nutrition your body craves. Go to Kachava.com and use code FITNESS. New customers get 15% off their first order. That's KACHAVA.com, code FITNESS.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
A warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Ben Wilson, who does such great work here at the network. We're going to take a look at what we've all seen here in the offseason with some of these coaching moves, the one that he likes. We're going to talk about Mike Malone becoming the new head coach over at North Carolina, his thoughts there, and then additionally, we're going to be taking a look at just some of the takeaways from this season and how they might be impacting the offseason with teams perhaps paying big money for big men, because we saw the teams that went big, they certainly were able to have themselves a massive year. And then in the final segment, we did see a few guys commit to where they're going to be playing next season. I'll give you a little bit of a roundup of that. And here in segment number 1, we did see a little bit of news from the NCAA trying to have a little bit of an age restriction, so we'll dive in on that front as well. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, the big piece of news that we saw in college basketball is that the NCAA is going to be proposing a 5-year clock that starts at the age of 19 for many of these guys. So there's no waivers, red shirts, or exceptions or anything like that. So if you turn 24 plus years old, you're ineligible to play college sports, which I think that's going to be interesting because this is no doubt going to be fought upon in the courts. You're going to have these guys that they get like multiple injuries, what have you, and it's probably going to be age discrimination as well. Like, keep in mind, to use a football reference here, Brandon Whedon was like super old when he was the quarterback over at Oklahoma State, so it's not always these international guys. It's not just guys that they just frankly have a lot of just red shirts. They find a way to be able to weasel their way into eligibility. Sometimes you get the non-traditional students as well. They're trying to weasel some of those guys out as well, because you always hear the inspiring story every single year about like the 35-year-old guy that walks onto like the Division II football, basketball insert team here, and everyone cheers and everything like that. So I do think that that is going to be very interesting to look at. And we've got a lot of orders that have been filed here in the last few weeks. We've obviously got this one, the one from Donald Trump, that has not slowed down guys from entering into the transfer portal whatsoever, though, mainly because, for one, the Trump order would not be taking hold until August 1st. So the way that I'm looking at things is that it looks like guys will be grandfathered in if they transfer before August 1st, because as of right now, most of the guys in the transfer portal have transferred more than once, so there's that aspect of things. And according to Jeff Goodman, this was tweeted out right around about 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, 1,850 players have entered into the transfer portal. That is 49% of guys that are returning to school. Last year was about 2,500, so no doubt about it, we have got a lot of guys that are in the transfer portal, and I will refresh verbal commits to also track this down. It's out 1,895. So over 50% of guys that are eligible to return to school, they have all at the transfer portal. A few of these guys have decided where they're going to be going. So we'll give you guys a little bit of a recap of that in the final segment, but I don't think that it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. I think that what you can look forward to this offseason, lots and lots of court battles, which that's not necessarily my most favorite thing in the world, but you know what? It is what it is, and I'll try to keep everything straight for you. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I know everything about the justice system, because I went to college over at UW-Oshkosh for radio, TV, film. I went there because I didn't want to get into these sorts of things, but here we are in this day and age. But I'm going to try to get on guests to help us understand this a little bit better, if there might be any sort of impact for this upcoming season. Again, I'm thinking that the answer is no, but I'm going to continue to dive in on this because, well, we've got 200 days of the offseason to take a look forward to, and we've got a lot of coaching moves to decipher, and we'll help you guys do that on the flip side as we'll talk about it with Ben Wilson. I know that he did a lot of play-by-play work for the WAC, which is no longer out there as well, so we'll talk a little bit about these mid-major schools. We'll talk about some of these coaching hires that we've been seeing, and so much more right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSIN Family Podcast.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSIN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSIN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSIN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSIN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSIN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSIN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSIN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ben Wilson aboard. He does such great work here at VSIN, doing so many different things, taking a look at our weekend live betting shows, does a great job on the tennis front, does a great job on the baseball front, college basketball. He is one of the best play-by-play voices that you're going to find out there as well, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Ben, his first name, an underscore, his last name Wilson, another underscore, and then the number one all together. And Ben, it's a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, absolutely. Always a pleasure coming on. And are you in the portal? I'm actually not. I feel like the only one who isn't at this time of year.
My goodness gracious. Allow me to hit refresh on verbal commits because that's how I track all these transfers. 1,186 guys have filed in, and we are doing this as it's been less than 48 hours. And just how do you take a look at the college basketball season? Because, I mean, it's just so wild. And I've said this on the podcast so many different times. I'm sure people are sick of me saying it, but I'm going to say it once again. It feels like it's news when a player comes back to school rather than when a player enters into the transfer portal.
No, it's so right. And if you kind of extrapolate it out, I mean, we're probably going to end up around 1,500. And I would think that's kind of a conservative number when all is said and done. So 1,500, that is.
We're at 1,886 right now. We're beyond 1,500.
So, okay. And that's why I said I was being conservative. So let's just say it ends at 2,000. So if you wanted to say that's the starting five and backup five for over half of the teams in the country. I mean, like, that's just the ridiculous scope of what we're looking at. I've certainly had people ask me, all right, like, season's over. Who do you like for next year? Any value on the futures board? There's no value. I mean, come on. We have no idea what these teams are looking like. I think if there's one piece of advice right now, it's just why you would ever tie your money up before, September at the absolute earliest is just beyond me with the way these things continue to shape up. But, I think having said all that, now that it's been going like this for a few years, and we just saw with what Michigan did, and I think that's going to be the new normal of these coaches at the top of the game are going to be more so evaluated on that combination of just in-game adjustments and coaching. We always knew Dusty May was elite at that, but also in kind of tandem with that whole principle that's gone back for years and years and years. It's, okay, how do you best evaluate these guys in the portal to come in and in one season, bring people together and mesh extremely well? And I think you'll have I don't think there's necessarily going to be instances where coaches just hit every single year. And I don't think there will be coaches that just completely whiff every single year. There are definitely guys better at it than others, but I don't think it's probably fair to just say, all right, well, Dusty May just did an awesome job with it this year, so whoever he gets next year, just expect Michigan to be right back there at the top. I also don't think that's fair to expectations on Michigan either. So it really does create this world, and especially with some of these coaches coming in. I think if there's one thing I look at it from a big picture angle, it's that first-year coaches might not be at as big of a disadvantage as they had been in the past, where if there's no culture to build anywhere, then are you really playing from behind if you come in as a first-year coach without much of a culture in that program? And that might be kind of a pessimistic way to look at, where the game is at. But I also just think it's reality, don't you?
Yep, I think so as well. And how much you just want to bank on some of these teams that do have big NIL budgets that that they're going to get something. But I also say that as well because Kentucky was the biggest spender in all of college basketball this last year and needed a 40-footer in order to knock off Santa Clara in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
Yes, I had just gotten over that loss on Santa Clara, so thank you.
Oh, I had the under in that game too. Don't worry.
We both are done by. And yes, it's kind of the reminder we always talk about in baseball, where just because you have the biggest payroll, and really until the Dodgers of this last couple of year stretch, that didn't necessarily always matter. I'm curious what you think on the situation at Arizona State. Like, a coach coming in from a mid-major who had a ton of success but with limited resources, now going to a program that across the board athletically, has pretty deep pockets, has a pretty deep alumni base, if we're being honest, has really underachieved based on the sort of talent they've brought in, based on the names they have had there. And if we're talking about Arizona State, in certainly a super rugged, tough, deep league in the Big 12, but I'm really curious to see. I definitely come into the year just fascinated to get an idea of where Randy Bennett will end up building that roster out at Tempe. He brought over Rick Croy, who I got to know really well, who was the coach at California Baptist, and it was pretty wild to see them basically admit Cal Baptist was not going to commit the sort of money that we needed to be competitive, so he left a head coaching job where he took a team to the tournament just to be an associate head coach at the Power 4 level. But they have a really good staff there. You can't question that. It's just been, will this move kind of be the kick that restarts things in a positive direction for ASU, a team that I think we kind of characterize them as a very up-tempo, very offensive-minded, but super inconsistent on the defensive side of the ball. And now we're going to get a complete 180 with the style that Randy Bennett had at St. Mary's. I think that's the one move that is the most fascinating to me so far in this whole cycle of coaches moving and thinking about who could make a big turnaround going into next year.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that Arizona State has set themselves up in really, really good shape. And I feel like there's a few West Coast teams out here that have done a solid job. As Ben Wilson, he does such great work here at VSIN, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, because I just still go back to Ben Jacobson, what he was able to do over at Northern Iowa, going on over to Utah State, who has had like 500 coaches in the last 500 years. And every single one of them, it feels like, has had a winning record. I feel like that's one as well that really stands out to me as a great move that was made this offseason.
Yeah, it's funny that he was the guy who ended up taking that job and leaving. I think part of why that has happened is it's been, for the most part, these really young coaches who they come up quickly, they have a lot of success, and Utah State ends up becoming kind of this stepping stone to a much bigger, higher profile job. I don't know about you. I kind of just assumed, and maybe this is because we were in high school when Ali Farokhmanesh shocked Kansas with Northern Iowa. I just kind of assumed I'd look up as a as a 60-year-old 30 years from now, and Ben Jacobson would still be coaching in Northern Iowa. Like he would just never leave. But it is interesting when you think about what, again, kind of in the same mold we're talking about with Randy Bennett, guy who was at a place forever. Most people would have thought he'd never really leave, but did a lot with a little as far as resources at the school, consistently was able to overachieve, get the most out of limited talent. And now you go to a place, and I mean, not to overgeneralize this, but we've seen it already with BYU. We know in that region of the country, there is a lot of money through the Church of Latter-day Saints. I'll put it that way, Greg. And I think that's going to be infiltrated into some of these other schools, certainly BYU, just with the recruitment of A.J. DeBonsa. We've all know the story and how that played out. There is a lot of money in that world. And it's certainly something to me that in this current era, I think it's probably, you got to think, well, at least one reason why Ben Jacobson would have been intrigued as a guy who had tenure in another place to come and take that job, because there's certainly a ton of talent both in the region as well as now with the money that is kind of poured into the area just from an economic standpoint. If you look at what's going on in the state of Utah and how successful they've been in so many ways from an athletic standpoint, I would think it should be a really good fit. And yeah, maybe this is the guy who finally breaks the mold of, okay, there for 1 or 2 years and then on to a Power 4 job.
Yep, I think so as well. And I mean, he stayed at Northern Iowa for darn near 20 years. So I think that that's going to be able to help out as well. And then we have to talk about this because I feel like it's the biggest piece of news that we've seen in college basketball over last week, other than the executive orders, what have you, with trying to limit eligibility, because that's going to be playing out in the courts in the future months. I might ask you about that in a minute or two. But Mike Malone, he takes a job over at North Carolina, a guy who last coached at the college ranks as an assistant over at Manhattan in like 2001, but it's a man that won a title with the Denver Nuggets, made Nikola Jokic what he is today. How do you take a look at this? Because I think there's one school of thought that the college game is a little bit more like the program that it was a few seasons ago, and at the same time as well, it's a guy that hasn't coached college basketball in about 25 years.
Right. Well, it seems like, just looking through the vast majority, and we obviously live kind of in a bubble in our own, college basketball universe. I feel like from people within our circles, it has been a resounding negative as far as the feedback to him getting hired. And I don't know if that's because UNC has sort of gone the complete opposite route that a lot of these very smart and analytically driven schools have been. And I think it's probably unfair to just lump them in and say, oh, okay, they hired Bill Belichick and now they're hiring Mike Malone. You're hiring these sort of dinosaurs in a sport that's only getting younger. I am tempted to zag a little bit and kind of lean more into the thing you first brought up, Greg, which is that, if we're being honest, college basketball, it's pro basketball now. It's just under the NCAA brand. I mean, that's not speaking out of school. Like, that's just the reality. So to bring in a guy who at least has an understanding of how to massage egos on an NBA roster, also melding guys from international backgrounds, which we're seeing an increasingly higher percentage of guys coming from overseas or from different countries. That is a sort of underrated thing that Mike Malone was always very good at doing. Now, was Nikola Jokic developed into the best player on the planet that he is because of Mike Malone? I would say no, but at the same time, you got to give him credit for what he did in the past. So I don't think this is at all, it's totally apples and oranges to me. If you're comparing this to the Belichick situation in football, like, Mike Malone isn't almost 80. He's not completely lost it. He's not over the hill. He's still, I think, from talking to people in NBA circles, still a very well-respected basketball mind. And who's to say that is not a really good sort of elixir to having success, the way the college game has morphed into kind of a pro game that's right below the NBA in today's day and age.
Yep, I'm right there with you, and I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out, and I do think that with Mike Malone taking that job, there is going to be some upside with it, but at the same time, too, there's a lot of concern as well, him trying to recruit where you don't have to do that as much in the NBA as well, so I think that that's a really interesting one to dive in on, and I think that the ACC in general is just such an intriguing conference because they did lose so many of the historic coaches. North Carolina is still reeling from losing Roy Williams. Syracuse is hoping that Jerry McNamara can finally get them online. As we know, Virginia, they're finally starting to get online. But how do you take a look at the entire conference? Because I felt like this year was a step in the right direction for them, but it still is a conference that isn't back to where they were even, say, 5 or so years ago.
No, and if you're looking at Syracuse having, I can't remember. In my lifetime, certainly, it's been about the worst stretch that they have ever played. And Jerry McNamara has been very open about the understanding that if you are going to be tied to a top level conference, and if you're going to list yourself as a top level conference and you have Syracuse in that conference, they have to be good. It's not reasonable to think that a bad Syracuse team can still be a part of a conference that's considered to be one of the 2 or 3 best leagues in the country. So I think that is a big part of it. Just kind of, as much as we like to make fun of Syracuse Mafia in the media, we're anti-Syracuse people on this side of the coin. At the same time, there is a ton of media influence that comes with that, and I do think they will be better immediately. It's hard for Syracuse to look any worse. But at the same time, I just believe with the resources being thrown out there and how it really is more dependent on the money that you're spending, I do think a lot of that upside is relatively capped. Maybe a team like Virginia is probably the one that I was probably more disappointed in as far as their lack of a run in the NCAA tournament and how they really crumbled under the pressure and under the intensity that Tennessee brought at them in the second round. That was probably the one team, if we're looking at it, who I felt like, with the roster they had built, with the coach that they had in Ryan Odom, could really be a team to make a Final Four run if they had the right sort of region. They certainly would not have beat Michigan anyway. That was sort of a team that was maxed out most likely at the Elite Eight level. But still, that's a group that should bring back enough to at least make you feel good going into the start of next year, and how they've finally distanced themselves from the old Tony Bennett mold that really does not constitute basketball in the current day and age that we live in. So I think that's the one program I'm looking at going into next year. Can they build off of this season? Can they use that sort of heartbreak in the tournament to their advantage with an obviously really smart coach who's very good with the analytics and the X's and O's and Ryan Odom? And where they go from here, I don't think there's any reason to believe that Virginia, if we're talking about the non-Duke teams that have a chance to take the next step next year, should not be at the top of that list.
Yep, I think so as well. And I do think that for Duke, they certainly have a great recruiting class coming in. I don't have any gripes or qualms about them. I think that they're going to be in for a good season, but what we're going to be able to get out of the rest of those teams, I think, is a little bit TBD at this point as well. And Ben, when it comes to this offseason, how much do you think that we could take away from this previous year as to how teams might be attacking things? Because the old adage used to be that guard play wins in March, but we did see this past season just a lot of teams in general stepping up with regards to the big men. They were able to really dominate the games down low, and I feel like this is becoming a little bit more of a big man's game. We even go back to a few seasons ago when the likes of Kofi Coburn and company were getting paid, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that this offseason as well.
No doubt, and it's a thing where we're in a current cycle, and it's a cyclical nature, how everything always seems to play out in college hoops and like so many other sports, college and pro, where I don't see this stopping, at least for the next couple of years. And especially as you look at as we're getting more international players, and the development of the international game has been predicated on these guys being able to have almost unlimited range, being able to be more comfortable stepping out and shooting a three when they are at 6'10", 6'11", big. To me, when you get more of those sorts of players into the game, that's only going to result now with the way a lot of teams try to set up okay, let's get our dunks in the three rate as high as humanly possible. And it's telling that is now a stat that is trackable. You can see what teams have the highest dunk in corner, even more specifically, corner three rate, with those being the most high percentage, most analytically sound shots you can take. So I don't see that going anywhere as far as that trajectory changing. And it really just comes down to, I think, again, from the NIL perspective, now that has become so part of the mainstream, how much of the resources get devoted to those sorts of players? Does the market all of a sudden now for that stretch four who can shoot 39% from three, does that become just significantly higher, the bar that you have to set, that you have to pay these guys, compared to just your standard 6'3" point guard who's going to be that game manager, floor general that I think for years and years always was sort of like the ballyhoed position in the game and was just waxed poetic on by so many kind of old school people in the media. That's probably the one thing I see that the gap might continue to widen if we're just talking what's a monetary value to a team. But as Michigan proved with, an Elliot Cadeau, there still can be a combination of factors. You still can find value in the maybe slightly undersized guy running point. You're just going to need to pair him up and have a tandem with somebody else who's got height and a collection of guys who have height who can also shoot from the outside.
Yep, I think that's so well said by you. And I do think that we are going to be in for a really interesting offseason. We've got 200 plus days to be able to take a look at it. So no shortage of things there. And Kurt and Ben, I know that you're doing such an amazing job. Take a look at so many different fronts. You're knee deep in baseball, much like myself. I know you're doing a lot of great work taking a look at college basketball all 12 months out of the year, because I know you do a lot of play-by-play work when it comes to the season and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben_Wilson _ number 1. Yeah, just had our last basketball broadcast of the year with the G League playoffs here last week. So sad that the hoop season has come to an end, but fear not. We have plenty to keep us busy here the next few months.
Oh, we certainly do. And Ben, he does such an amazing job just taking a look at this great game of college basketball and so much more. And every single time he joins me, he lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Ben for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. And coming up next, we did see a few guys actually go to stops. They decided where they're going to be playing college basketball next year. We'll give you a roundup of that next.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. Well, it was great to be joined by our guy, Ben Wilson, who does such great work here at VSIN, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he learns such great insights. Did so once again today. So a big thanks to Ben for joining me in the last segment. Now I'll give you a little bit of a roundup as to the news and notes we saw in college basketball on Wednesday. We do have a few guys that have decided where they're going to be playing for the upcoming season, including Andre 3000 Pasha. He was over at the newest Division I school, New Haven, last year, and he was a solid player at 6'9". 10.5 points, shot 35% from 3, 5 boards. He's going to be heading on over to Bryant. Bryant was one of the worst teams in all of college basketball last year with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. You could tell that they needed just a little bit more athleticism, a little bit more, shall we say, versatility. I do think that they are going to be able to get that. And for Bryant, this is going to be season number 2 of a coach that I actually thought was pretty solid in Jamion Christian. I remember he was doing great things when Mount St. Mary's was still at the lower level. So I do think that he's going to be able to get things a little bit more online. That's a good pickup for them. Tyler Hauser, he was over at Delaware last year, and I knew he was rock solid for Delaware at 6'9", shot 38.5% for 3, 14 points, 5.5 boards. He's going to be heading on over to Chattanooga, a Chattanooga team that just got absolutely killed on the boards. They really didn't have a single player that played all season long that had over 4 rebounds per game. They're always a team that's built around three-point shooting. I think that this is a good pickup for them. I think that this is a much-needed one as well, because Chattanooga, they were just down this past season. He began his career over at VMI, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think that in his last year, he might have caught the tail end of Coach Dan Earl. If not, he was at the very least recruited by him, so there are some ties there, so that'll be helping out Chattanooga moving forward, and I thought that that was a solid pickup for them. You had another pickup with Oswin. Oh man, I'm going to get this last name incorrect. You're on Wednesday? Hopefully I got that correct. I always like to call him Oswin from Providence, but he has decided that he is going to be staying within the conference. He goes from Providence, and he's going to be playing for Creighton, and he was one of the lone guys for Providence that played any sort of defense whatsoever this past season, and he's a solid big man. 7 points, 8.3 boards, was able to rack up about 2 blocks per contest a season ago. The offensive game is rather limited. He's not going to be popping threes or anything like that, but did shoot over 67% from the floor. It appears as though Creighton might be looking to take on a little bit of a new leaf, as Alan Huss is now the new coach, as he was the coach in waiting this past season after he did such a great job with High Point, a guy that played for his college basketball over at Creighton, so he's got great roots there. So I did think that Alan is doing a great job in terms of being able to build the program in a little bit more of his liking, try to make this High Point 2.0 at a little bit of a bigger stop, and I think that that is a good pickup for them to be able to get things all rocking and rolling there. This is getting rocking and rolling as well, as you did see Brock Weiss. He was over at Murray State last season, and he decided that he is going to be going to Kansas State, and you're going to get a few of these as well. Some of these guys said, they didn't contribute a whole heck of a lot to decide, hey, we're going to be entering into the transfer portal for Vice. He was over at Murray State last year, averaging 2 points per game at 6'10", did shoot 36.5% from three, but don't think that he's going to be making too much of an impact for Kansas State. But Kansas State, congratulations, they were able to get a body. Trey Moss, he was pretty solid over at George Washington, and at his previous stops, he has decided that he is going to be staying within the Atlantic 10. He is going to be exploring with the LaSalle Explorers, and for Trey Moss, a guy that is able to give you a little bit of versatility at the guard spot, stands right around about 6'3", just was unable to get out there on the floor this past season for George Washington. But when we saw him over at William & Mary during the 2023-24 season, he was able to rack up about 13.5 points per game. He was dealing with injury, and I know that there might have been a few eligibility concerns as well. Some LaSalle group that really struggled here this past season. They get a nice pickup there, so I think that that's going to be able to help them out moving forward. And I think that this one is going to be a little bit helpful as well. As you did see Antonio Munoz, who he was over at Grambling this last season as a true freshman. He was one of the main scorers for the team. Not a guy that's really going to be popping in and locking it from three-point range, but he was able to be a nice difference maker with about 12.5 points, pair of assists per contest. He had 6'6" as a side that he is going to be going to San Diego. San Diego, they parted ties with Steve Lavin, so they're looking to be able to turn over a little bit of a new leaf. They went a little bit younger. I think that this is going to be able to help them do so, and I feel like that was a very good pickup for them, so we're going to see how that's going to be working out. You did see Miles White, who was over at Lipscomb this last season. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Lindenwood. Not a guy that was too much of an impact guy. Missed all of this past season due to injury 2 seasons ago. Was averaging about 3 points per contest, but for Lindenwood, a school that was at the Division II ranks for so long, being able to get someone like that, I think that he could be a little bit of a cog for them for the upcoming season. Still has plenty of eligibility, so that's going to be able to help them out as well. And then we did see a little bit of a surprise guy go down to the non-D1 ranks. Otto Landrum was always pretty solid over at Boston College. Did see his just playing time cut a little bit short due to injury. This past season, he was unable to get out there at all. 2 years ago, he only played 19 games, but this was a guy that a few seasons ago was averaging 8.5 points, 5.5 boards as a starter for Boston U. He's decided that he's going to be going to Point Nazarene Lamona. Hopefully I got that correct. That's actually a very good Division II school, but these are easy enough for your handicapping. All you need to do is note that Mr. Landrum, he is not going to be heading back to Boston College. Cross him off your list of guys that you need to evaluate and move on. And then for Jerry McNamara, the Siena to Syracuse train continues. He was able to get Gavin Doty very early on in the process, and now he's got Tasman Goodrick coming over as well. He was limited to just 9 games this past season. When he was out there, he was rock solid, 9.5 points, 7 boards, a block per contest. Not a guy that's going to light you up from 3, but at 6'10", comes over from Australia. That helps him out. So he and Doty, they have already got familiarity with Jerry McNamara. We'll see who he's able to retain from this past Syracuse roster and who he all wants to retain as well, because there's going to be probably some guys that he may not want as well from the Autry era. But for a lot of these coaches that they took new jobs, you have to expect that they're going to be trying to bring in some of their own. McNamara, he's been one of the first of them to be able to do so. Do think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of that moving forward, and we're going to be rounding it up every single day on this podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, the mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, give you a roundup of what we've got here in the transfer portal, these coaching moves, get set for the 2026-27 season. Then once the season tips off, you're getting picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you joining me today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.